Hello and welcome to another Divinity Original Sin video. This is the final tier list of the Scoundrel tier that I will do. I think I maybe have done one of these before actually, and I haven't really touched upon it since. So here we are, wrong in the right, and putting forth my thoughts and my opinion on the Scoundrel skills. As you can see from on the left hand side, there's the tier list ranking goes from unique being the best and common being the worst. So without further ado, let's get stuck into the Scoundrel skills. So a very obvious one, and I really don't think there's any argument in where Adrenaline belongs, and that would be the unique tier. It gives you 2 AP up front and a deduction of 2 AP for the following turn. It's always better to front load your AP because it means 1, you can get more things done. 2, if the 2 AP means you proc execution, great. Or if you need to land that vital bit of crowd control. It's very accessible. 1 Scoundrel, doesn't cost any AP to use it. It's part of numerous wonderful combinations or broken combinations, like with skin graft. It means you get 2 adrenalines in a turn, which is pretty ridiculous. Yeah, it's a universal one. It's like it works with every single build. You'll want to get this as soon as possible. Yeah, it's just so impactful. It's ridiculous. So for me, Adrenaline isn't unique. Chloroform. I really like Chloroform, but I don't think it's as good as I used to think it was. So, what does it do? For 1 AP, it means you get to put an enemy to sleep. Sleep is very nice crowd control. But it's a little bit vulnerable that the enemies can just hit their teammates and wake them up. But for 1 AP for solid crowd control is really good. Really you're only going to be using this in magical parties because it does magical damage only. Only 1 Scoundrel, again, so it's really easy to use. You can use this in stealth, you can use this on a good number of builds. But the thing that really kind of hurts it is the amount of damage it can do. Now, it scales with finesse, so ideally you're going to use this with a rogue or a huntsman, or even mage builds, to be honest, if you're not really fussed about the damage. But even if you're super hard pumping finesse, it really doesn't scale super hard in terms of damage. So that's where it kind of falls off for me a little bit. But you can't deny for 1 AP it's really solid. Solid CC. For me it's a divine spell. Backlash. I really like this one. For 1 AP you effectively get a miniature jump, damage, and 85% of that. 85% for 1 AP is very good, but the fact that you get a jump, damage, and the backstab critical as well, it's pretty fantastic. And considering you're only spending 1 AP to do that, I think it's super good value. So a jump, damage, critical, 85% all in one. For me it's a unique tier skill. Gag order. Don't really like it, to be honest. It only does magical damage. I'm not actually sure in terms of the damage it does, but it really wouldn't change my mind, to be honest. You're not really playing rogues inside of magical parties. They're going to be in physical based. So focusing like on magic damage, magic armor is pretty bad, and it's only focusing on magic armor, and it's a silence, so it's not exactly super great crowd control. So I don't really rank this. I personally would avoid it. I don't really see situations where you really, I mean, maybe early game against low magic armor targets are actually, I think you get this at level 9 actually, so I don't even think that's an option. I could be wrong on that. I think it is level 9 that you get it. Anyway, I just don't really see any use for it at all. For me, it's in the common. Another skill that goes in common for me is Terrifying Cruelty. The damage on it is really terrible. 110% for 3 AP, which is awful. Again, it focuses on the magic armor. Same problem as Gag Order. Rogues really shouldn't be focusing that way, and Terrified's a nice crowd control, but yeah, it's not worth using. Avoid, and you pick this up super late in the game as well. I really don't understand why they hated this skill so much. It's gutter. It's gutter tier, honestly. And speaking of other common skills, I would put Sleeping Arms in that category as well. It's 100% damage, solid, atrophies for 2 turns, which is kind of nice, but you look at the other options around you, comparison, there's better crowd controls out there. Better crowd controls that maybe do AoE as well. There's a lot of other, if I'm looking to crowd control, there's a lot of other things that I'm looking to use before Sleeping Arms. So for me, I just wouldn't pick up the skill at all. And it's 100% damage, so yeah, nothing great. I mean, I suppose thinking about it, if you're able to get a crit off with this, and is a ranger or a warrior that doesn't use spells, sure, the atrophy can just nullify them useless, to be fair. I mean, I suppose in those situations, actually, you know what, yeah. I suppose in those situations where you're using it against a ranger or melee, it's better to do that instead of like the hard crowd control. Reason being is they're nullified useless because of the atrophy, but you're still doing 100% damage instead of the reduced damage of a knockdown or whatever. But you know, if there's multiple enemies, you're not really going to be using it. But for those single target situations that come up, sure, actually I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to put it in uncommon. Next we're going to rank Throwing Knife. Throwing Knife I'm going to put in uncommon. The only reason why it's in uncommon is that it's ranged. Other than that, it's terrible. Rogues don't really have a lot of ranged options. The very rare occasions where this will be useful and you can't move, you might as well just throw the knife. Like, that is literally all it's worth. The damage is really bad. And this really, as far as I can think of it, it's only really going to apply early. Later in the game, when you pick up, you have your standard warfare skills for the most part. But if you're looking to do ranged attacks, I guess Fan of Knives will come into consideration. I don't really think that leaves a place for Throwing Knife, honestly. So I think early game, when you can't reach targets, this is the only situation where it's going to be useful to you. Next, we're going to look at Sawtooth Knife. probably just about gets into the rare tier. To me, it's only rare if you're able to one-shot enemies, which I just don't think is very, very likely, just doing one sawtooth knife. Another positive for it is that it does do piercing damage, and it will turn all buffs into piercing as well, so there's that bonus. But really, it's only going to be like really... it's only going to be really useful when you can pair it with Marksman Fang, or you're pairing it with Skin Graft. So you're working with two of your characters to just pierce through the armor, or you're doing that same thing, only you're doing it with Skin Graft. Other than that, if you're not able to effectively like two-shot enemies, it's the piercing damage doesn't really matter. Like, it's not that big of a deal. So for me, it probably reaches rare. The things that really hurt a lot of the Scoundrel skills is that they are for the most part single target, and seeing that rogues have access to warfare skills, this really hurts the tree. So yeah, I think the only sort of situations it really fits into rare is with Skin Graft, using it twice, or using it with a teammate that is able to pierce damage too. Other than that, it's probably a lower rank, and you probably won't really be using it much if you can't use it in those combinations. That's just how I see it. So, Sawtooth Knife, rare. Daggers Drawn. There's an identical skill called Onslaught in the Warfare tree. Only the damages are slightly different, but then I think that's just because Daggers Drawn will be critting 100% time if you're backstabbing. So I think because I've rated Onslaught in the legendary, I think it makes sense to put Daggers Drawn in the legendary tier as well. Yeah, identical damage, identical in the way it works, legendary. Cloak and Dagger is probably the second best jump skill behind Tactical Retreat. I'd probably say Tactical Retreat is unique. That for me is quite definitive. I think the better uses for this jump is more for outside of combat, jumping into combat or setting up for combat, because it allows you to remain sneaking. That is its biggest selling point. It is nice that you can jump and cloak. It's not that big a deal to be able to do that, to be fair. But the perks are that you can use this with the sneaking and the stealth, I think. So I'd probably say it fits into legendary. I think it's better than Phoenix Dive for the most part, and I don't think it's as good as Tactical Retreat. So I think legendary is probably the place for it to be. Corrupted Blade. I think I finally got the right balance of understanding this skill. Now, okay, single target, can admit, 150% damage for 3 AP, very flat. Deceased, that's okay, but it's the decaying part that kind of has made me open my eyes a little bit to give it a little bit more value. Now, the reason why I think that's a thing is it kind of it opens the door to the poisoning on your weapon. it opens the door to venom coating, perhaps. Because what it will do is it will turn that poison damage onto undead into physical damage. So that's a bit of a game changer. Not that much of a game changer, but it does open the door to it. And I think that's why it has a little bit more value than I used to think of it. But the thing that really hurts is just that it's just single target. But like I said, it opens those doors to those other few things. So damage is standard, single target hurts it, but the fact that it can open the door to getting a little bit more damage and opening the door to maybe venom coating against those undead characters with the decaying, it kind of gives it a bit more life. So I'd probably say, if you can get those circumstances, maybe squeeze in rare. Otherwise, it's if against undeads, I'd probably say rare. But for the most part, it's probably uncommon. But there is quite a lot of undead enemies in the game, to be fair. I think it's somewhere between rare and uncommon, to be honest. I think for the most part, Corrupted Blade is probably sitting in uncommon, but I think against undeads, you could perhaps say it's rare. And I've already touched on other videos and how using heal spells to do damage is pretty mediocre because other things just outshine it. So that doesn't really give it a major selling point. It's just I'm just more of thinking of the poison and the venom coating actually becoming viable options because of this one. So it's tricky. It's in between, to be honest. I might come back to this one. Okay, Ruptured Tendons. Again, this is another one I think is a little bit tricky to rank, and I don't think this is going to be popular opinion because everybody loves the combination of Chicken Claw and Ruptured Tendons. It's awesome, it's cool, it's funny. But again, it suffers the same problem as a lot of the Scoundrel skills. Single target. Single target. It's best in combination with the chicken, but that is a hefty 4 AP just to pull that combination off. That's very expensive. You just think you can just crowd control normally and you're doing more damage. And to think of it, like, the Chicken Claw's not even that reliable in that they're always going to move. I've always found sometimes the chicken moves, sometimes the chicken stays still. It does make things awkward though, I must say. Like, you've got Ruptured Tendons on you, dare not move, you can't jump because you're going to take a boatload of damage. But in my playthroughs, typically I don't like the enemies being free to do anything, so they don't really tend to move around. So again, for me, this is a very, very difficult one to rank. Again, I'm kind of initially thinking it's like somewhere between uncommon and rare. I'm just thinking that you don't want your enemies to be freely moving around. Okay, then where is Ruptured Tendons going to get its use from if they're not moving around? They're not, so why use it? I don't know. To use it, the Chicken Claw, like I've already said, 4 AP is very expensive. Yes, granted, the Chicken Claw is like 2 turns of crowd control. We got there. 2 turns of crowd control. But Chicken Claw itself is single target. I don't like that about Chicken Claw either. I don't like that Chicken Claw doesn't do damage. I don't like Chicken Claw, but chicken doesn't always run. So I think for fun, if we're thinking, for fun, Chicken Claw and Rupture Tendons is a very nice combo. Do I think it justifies all the AP for the damage? Probably not. I prefer hard crowd control, my enemy is not moving around, so for the most part I probably wouldn't touch it. So I think it's somewhere between rare and uncommon. But I think, you know what, if we're... Yeah, you know what, I will leave it in the rare. I'm slightly leaning more towards rare uncommon. Maybe I'm a little bit, but I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit biased here just because of the combination. It is quite fun. Yeah, but also I suppose what I do like about it is that it can be used as crowd control by itself. Like, can you imagine chucking this on an enemy, or and they're miles away from your team? They just don't have the option of moving. If they do move, they're getting killed because of the damage. So I guess, yeah, like in some circumstances, and because maybe a little bit biasy, probably gonna go in the rare. Fan of knives. Now, I have not been a fan of knives, but I don't know, for some reason, like, I've kind of just been awoken to the idea that it's not actually as bad as I ever thought it was. You know, rogues don't really have a lot of AoE options aside from like Whirlwind being the most super reliable one of them all. But what this one does do is that it gives you the opportunity to use something on high ground that covers like a large area and able to do 125% damage to however many enemies there are. So that's a really big selling point. There's difficulty in getting the backstab reliably on each target. You're just not going to really get that situation come up. But also, if enemies are positioned extremely carefully, I'm not entirely sure like the exact sort of positioning you need for them, but you can get this to hit multiple times, or at least 2 times really, which makes it inherently more valuable again. A little bit like Superconductor, but I find it a little bit more difficult to hit multiple times with this one rather than Conductor. It does require Source, and does require free AP. So if we're looking in terms of, it's a bit more of a situational skill. If all the enemies are together, Whirlwind is going to be more reliable, of course, and obviously per AP you're getting more damage from it. But for the situations where that's not actually possible, like I said, you can still use this on high ground, which does give that a little bit more of an oomph. I've come to sort of like it a little bit, even though it's a little bit situational and tricky to use at times. But if you're able to pull that off, it's actually really good. So I'd probably go as far as saying this is a legendary, which is a complete swing to where I've always used to have it. I've always used to have it in like rare, uncommon, it's trash, don't use it. But I think it's been a lot better than I've given it credit for. And this is one skill that I can think of that I've taken a little bit of a U-turn on how I view it. So for me, fan of knives, around the legendary. And then we come to the big one, Mortal Blow. Very difficult one to rank. It has 140% damage, but it does double that. if you're in stealth or sneaking, which makes it extremely powerful single target skill. It can do 280% for 2 AP, which is pretty incredible. That is really, really good single target damage. You know, it's I mean, we're looking at daggers drawn. It's 4 AP, 325%. This does 280 for 2 AP. Obviously, these are capable of critting multiple times, but I mean, look at Onslaught as well, 300% for 4 AP. So the damage on it is actually quite, it's very, very, very impressive. But the other thing to sort of consider is when and how you're using this. If you're using this in combat, it means that you're going to need to stealth or sneak. Chameleon Cloak is an easy option, but that costs 1 AP, so now it's 3 AP for 280%. But the best time to be using this is pre-combat. You start off sneaking, and then you start off the fight by using Mortal Blow. Boom. That just makes it even more incredible. So again, we've got this troublesome problem of when and how you're using this and where you're going to end up ranking this. I think if you are using this pre-combat and sneaking, I think it's probably within the top 2. Just thinking, you know, on the basis that you're doing 280% damage outside of combat, which is pretty insane. And you know, even if you are using it during combat, 3 AP for it's essentially 3 AP for 280% damage. Again, that's very good numbers too. And obviously, we're not even going to worry about using it without stealth because, well, I think you got maybe a little bit of a learning curve if that's the way you're using it. So I'd say between unique and divine, if you're using it before combat, stealthed, maybe divine. I mean, let's think about it, right? I think if we're putting it that's, yeah, I'll tell you what, I think unique's probably a little bit too high. Thinking about some other skills that's in there, you got like or I have, the other damaging ones that I have in there is, what do I have in there? I have ballistic shot, but that's 2 AP, no source, etc. I think you look at assassinations, 190%, and doesn't cost any source. Yeah, I think I would probably put Mortal Blow in Divine if you're using this before combat. If you're using this during combat, 280% for 3 AP. I think it's probably legendary at that point, right? I mean, like I said, compare 280% for 3 AP. Obviously, I'm just taking into consideration that you're going to have to stealth. And then you look at the Onslaught, 300 for 4 AP. Daggers Drawn, 325 for 4 AP. It's like in that vicinity, you know? So, for me, pre-combat, Divine. During combat, it's legendary. So it's in between. It's sort of in between, but I think If I had to choose between Divine and Legendary, I think I'd probably go with Legendary. Reason being is, again, if we're drawing comparison to Onslaught and Daggers Drawn, Mortal Blow is 3 source points. These are 2. So the amount of source kind of weakens it in comparison to those 2, but the fact that you can use this pre-combat, I mean, I suppose the argument could be that you could use Onslaught pre-combat if you wanted to. I mean, if you wanted to. I'm just trying to get the right decision here. I do think it's in between for sure. The source points knocks it down, but the really great use is using it pre-combat. But then now I'm thinking about it, I think I could argue the case for a lot of skills to be used that way. So I think maybe, yeah, I'm gonna keep this. I'd say yeah. So to confirm what I actually think, Divine pre-combat, but for the most part I think it probably leans more into Legendary. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with probably putting it in there. Yeah. Alright, okay, cool. Okay, so to recap, at long last we have Adrenaline and Backlash in Unique, Chloroform in Divine, we have Daggers Drawn, Cloak and Dagger, Fan and Knives, and Mortal Blow in Legendary. Nothing in Epic, boo-hoo. Sawtooth Knife, Corrupted Blade, and Ruptured Tendons, just about gets into Rare. Sleeping Arms, Throwing Knife in Uncommon, and then Gag Order and Terrifying Cruelty in Common. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below. Other than that, thank you for watching, and see you guys in the next one.